So what are some other key moments from American presidential history today to reflect on? Stirewalt here to break it all down. Chris?
Biden was actually at that trial. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't remember that, but Biden was actually there. He did a great job. Okay, today is the federal observance of the birthday of George Washington, born on February 22nd, 1732, about 80 miles south of here along the Potomac River in Virginia. We're celebrating Washington and the standard for presidential leadership he set. First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. His sacrificial leadership at Valley Forge, his steady hand at the Constitutional Convention, his gift for compromise in establishing the new government. But perhaps the very best thing George Washington did as president was to quit. He stunned the world by stepping aside after 2 terms. When his old adversary, King George III, heard the news, he couldn't believe it, saying of Washington, if he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world. And maybe he was. But he believed in his country. He knew that if America couldn't make it without him, America couldn't make it at all. As they would say on the North Fork of Short Creek, it's time to root hog or die. And that puts Washington's farewell address, September 19th, 1796, as #1 on our list of 4 key moments of presidential leadership by leaving. He exhorted his fellow Americans to be virtuous, to become better educated, balance the budget, and seek peace with other nations. But most importantly, to not become divided by partisan factions, lest they be targets of demagogues who would destroy the new republic. Parties, he warned, would, quote, become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and usurp for themselves the reins of government. Sound familiar? #2 belongs not to a president who left, but one who was willing to leave. On November 8th, 1864, Abraham Lincoln stood for re-election during the Civil War. No president had won a second term in 32 years, and a war-weary nation wanted peace. Many radical Republicans believed Lincoln should use his extraordinary war powers to delay or modify the election. But like Washington, Lincoln believed in America. He couldn't defend the Constitution and disgrace its principles at the same time. When the campaign began, it looked bad for the great emancipator, but he won the election and won the war. #3 on our list of leadership by leaving is an unlikely hero, Lyndon Johnson. On March 31st, 1968, the ruthlessly ambitious Texan shocked the world when he announced at the end of an Oval Office address on the Vietnam War that he was dropping out of the presidential race.
I have concluded that I should not permit the presidency to become involved in the partisan divisions that are developing in this political year.
Boom. Johnson knew he couldn't be president and run for president effectively in a time of national crisis. Physically and mentally exhausted, he couldn't unite a deeply divided nation. #4 on the list of leadership by leaving belongs to Johnson's successor, Richard Nixon, on August 8th, 1974.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first.
Nixon, like many of his supporters, believed that he was being persecuted by Democrats and the members of the liberal media who were using the bungled burglary of the Democratic campaign offices at the Watergate building as a pretext to get rid of a president who they hated. He fought them in the courts. He purged his administration of dissenters. He tried every trick he could think of. But in the end, rather than subject the country to an impeachment and trial that he knew would have been a delight to America's adversaries, Nixon went away quietly and let the nation get on with the work of healing. Now, I'm not suggesting that our current leaders should or could meet the standards of Washington and Lincoln, some of the greatest figures in human history. But what about Landslide Lyndon and Tricky Dick? Could President Biden find the faith in America and humility to step aside during an election year, as Johnson did? It would be messy, maybe as messy as it was in 1968. But in the wake of the Hur report and the open questions about his obviously diminished abilities, Biden could leave off as a hero simply by choosing not to run. What if Donald Trump was a man of as much character as Richard Nixon? What if, before his second impeachment for sending an angry mob to the Capitol to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, Trump had resigned and let Mike Pence preside over the final 2 weeks of the term? Trump would have done something that he will never do by holding power and seeking another term: unite the nation and ensure his place in history as someone who put the national interest ahead of his own. Remember, Washington's words about unprincipled men who subvert the power of the people to usurp for themselves. That's the danger we always face. And that's why we rely on what Lincoln called the better angels of our nature in our leaders, men and women who summon the courage to place their faith in America, not themselves.
Stirewalt breaks it down on this President's Day.
Holiday edition.
You two might have been shaking your heads at one point. Julia's sitting here smiling.
I was really happy you included LBJ. I think LBJ is one of the most underrated presidents, and I thought his decision, you pointing out his decision to leave, was fascinating.
Really? And in both Johnson and Nixon's case, they were pretty rotten guys at many points in their lives, right? They were ruthlessly ambitious. They cut corners. They fought. They did all this stuff. But at the moment when history tapped them on the shoulder, they went. And leaving, you have to have a lot of courage to run for office, right? You have to have a ton of courage to run for office. We need people of courage to run for office, but you also have to have courage to leave. And we need a lot more leavers these days.
All right. Thank you for watching, and make sure you go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.